Welcome back to the Alley Oop Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Morrissey. You picked a great one. We have talented author, actor, Stephen Tobolowsky. I would call him raconteur. Is that a word you can use? But he's a great storyteller, talented actor. Has been in so many movies you can't even keep track. And so, and I'm super excited to have him on the Funny Writers Reading Their Stories show, January 12th at the Promenade Playhouse in Santa Monica. For ticket info, you can go to paulhasawebsite.com under the shows listed. So here's a quick look at Steven's work, just so you remember how funny he is. Here's Seinfeld, Spaceballs, and, of course, Groundhog Day.
Ah, what a pity. What a pity. So, Princess, you thought you could outwit the imperious forces? You idiots! These are not them. You've captured their stunt doubles!
Would you not put your foot on that, please?
Sorry.
What month were you born?
April.
You should have been born in August. Your parents would have been well advised to wait.
Really?
Do you use hot water in the shower?
Yes.
Stop using it.
Phil? Hey, Phil? Phil Connors? Phil Connors, I thought that was you.
Hi, how you doing? Thanks for watching.
Hey. Now, don't you tell me you don't remember me, because I sure as heck fire remember you.
Not a chance.
Ned! Ryerson! Needle-nosed Ned the head. Come on, buddy. Case Western High. Ned Ryerson. I did the whistling belly button trick at the high school talent show. Bing! Ned Ryerson got the shingles real bad senior year, almost didn't graduate. Bing! Again! Ned Ryerson. I dated your sister Mary Pat a couple times till you told me not to anymore. Well?
Ned Ryerson?
Bing!
Bing! So did you turn pro with that belly button thing, Ned? Or
No, Phil, I sell insurance. It is so good to see you. What are you doing for dinner?
Something else. It's been great seeing you, Needlehead. Take care.
Watch out for that first step. It's a doozy.
This is Paul Morrissey. I'm here at Montreux, Switzerland. I'm overlooking I guess this is Lake Geneva, where it was the inspiration for Smoke on the Water by Deep Purple. Dun, dun, dun. I can't sing the whole thing or else I have to pay royalties, but that's, so there's a casino down the street that was on fire, and that inspired them to write that song, Smoke on the Water. There's your history. And it was also cool because I went down there. That's also where Queen recorded a lot of their albums, including having a few drinks with David Bowie and going into the studio and recording Under Pressure. So that was pretty cool. But I'm here for the Montreux Comedy Festival. I'm just waiting for my ride. I'm the last one left. Everyone else left town. I'm going to Switzerland tonight to meet up with my buddy Ari Shafir, doing some shows in Amsterdam, which is a surprise trip. But I really slacked on trying to do a couple podcasts here. I did a show here with a couple South African guys that I actually did a show with in Montreal at the Just for Laughs Festival. Loisa, who I wanted to get on the podcast, and I totally forgot to ask him when I had him yesterday, and we were chatting about basketball and sports. So this was a blast. It was great. It was a fun show, fun festival. There definitely was like a language barrier. They speak like a Swiss German here, and it's also on the border of France. So they were very enthusiastic about the show. And it was also cool to see how people in Europe react, because this was literally my first European show. So this is cool. So I did want to introduce this podcast with Stephen Tobolowsky, because we're going to do our Funny Writers Reading Stories show with Stephen Tobolowsky, who's written a couple great books. He's an actor in one of my favorite movies of all time, Groundhog Day. He's Ned, the insurance salesman, Ned Ryerson. I'm trying to be a little bit quiet because I'm in the hotel lobby, even though everyone's speaking another language. I don't want to seem like I'm doing a radio show here, but it was fun. This was a really cool experience to come to Switzerland, and thanks for everybody for supporting me and clicking on my page and all that stuff and listening to the podcast. So let's see. I'm trying to think. They eat a lot of cheese here. There was there's like a Christmas fair down the block where they have these great French baguette. Like the bread here is amazing. It's like the French bread, and also obviously the chocolate. So we've had a bunch of that. But this Christmas fair, they were hollowing out bread. They just put it on a spike, and then they pour white wine and cheese into it and let it harden. And so all of our meals have been something including cheese and meat. So it's been another great week for just eating delicious, fattening food and not working out too much. So hopefully we'll walk. We walked around here a little bit, but yeah, the food was great. And everyone with the festival was so cool. And I was just coming off. I did the Artie Lang show, which is another cool milestone in my life. I'm a huge Howard Stern fan. I'm actually a huge fan of Artie's show right now. So I got to be on it last week with my old friend John Ritchie, who's now the sidekick. And he used to be a guy I interviewed actually starting in his rookie year with the Raiders when I was working for KRCR-TV, the ABC station. So yeah, I got to talk about that. And if you haven't seen any clips yet, they're on my website, paulsawebsite.com. And there's a guy looking around. Are you going to the airport? Excuse me? Oh, I don't want to miss my ride. So, what was I talking about? Oh, yeah. So doing the Artie Lang show. And then I also, let's see. Also, what else did we do? We had a lot of food. We got to chat. It was a really, friendly festival, and everyone was just here. We got to meet. I got to meet a couple guys from Denmark that do this cool kind of TV show. Actually rode in from the airport. They were pretty crazy. And then there was another group from the UK that have their TV show. They prank a lot of the political leaders and stuff like that. So that was a cool show. And there was also a couple guys from Los Angeles that I ended up meeting. So and the head of the Just for Laughs festival, Montreal, Bruce Hills, was here, and he was friends with Queen's manager, who was in the front row for our show. So that was a cool thing, and everyone's staring at me now because I'm holding a broadcast microphone, and I'm just talking to myself. So yeah, we're going to Amsterdam. I'm sure me and Ari will do a couple podcasts from there, so that will be a blast. But I wanted to make sure I got one intro, at least from Switzerland, overlooking this beautiful site. You can see the French Alps, the Swiss Alps. You can see castles, and this lake is just beautiful. It's so still, and yeah, it's really beautiful if it wasn't 30 degrees. So there's a lot of people coming and looking around and then going out. So all right. So, what else can I talk about? I bought a lot of chocolate so far. I bought some Freddie Mercury T-shirts. Queen seems to be a big thing in these parts. There's a Freddie Mercury statue at the end of the road here. I did eat at McDonald's yesterday, and I did get the Royale with cheese, like they mentioned in Pulp Fiction. But also, it was funny that they do not have chicken McNuggets. They are called Chicken Crocs. Chicken Crocs, which is probably closer to what they actually are, a croc. So what else? Yeah, I wish I wasn't so distracted, but I don't want to miss my ride to the airport. But thank you guys so much for listening. This is an awesome episode with Stephen Tobolowsky. He's a super fascinating guy and tells a lot of great stories. They're funny, they're touching, they're like moving, inspiring too. So yeah, and he's going to be on the story reading show next month, reading something from his I think the new book that he's working on. So January 12th at the Promenade Playhouse in Santa Monica. You can go to my website to get the ticket info, paulhasawebsite.com. It's right down the 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica. Beautiful theater. So I actually had to move it because I was in Switzerland this week. So we're going to do it January 12th. That's a Sunday at 8 p.m. And for all the info, go to paulhasawebsite.com. So thank you guys so much for listening. And goodbye from Switzerland, and enjoy this episode with Stephen Tobolowsky.
Stephen Tobolowsky. Yo, check that. Stephen T to the motherfucking Y. Who the hell is this guy? He's a character actor from Hollywood. You can catch him in HBO's Deadwood. He's also been...
Well, we're here with Stephen Tobolowsky. Thanks so much for being on the show, sir.
Thank you, sir.
And I don't know if we might have to introduce this right away as our first meeting. And I'll introduce it from my point of view. Unless this is legally, we're not allowed to say this.
Now, I think we're released from all bonds of silence now.
So I ended up watching Stephen Tobolowsky's birthday party, the movie. And is that on the streaming Netflix, or I got it on a disc from Netflix? I'm pretty sure.
I think it's on disc from Netflix.
Yeah.
I don't think we're streaming.
Right.
We're pre-streaming. But we're on Hulu.
Oh, okay.
You can get it on Hulu, and that, I think, is a streaming sort of thing.
Yeah, which is a great, and I knew you as an actor. Like, I'm a big fan of your work as an actor, and I like, and it's funny, because with this podcast, I've gotten to interview a lot of great actors, and you always come up somehow. Like, the last episode we had Earl Brown, as you probably know.
Yep.
And so we got into some of the Deadwood stuff, and he mentioned one of the, I guess it would be an uncomfortable moment that you were old friends with Powers Booth.
Well, that was one of them, yeah.
And then his daughter played
It's one of those really, this is Hollywood, and there's so many touching father-daughter stories. And, of course, to me, one that comes to mind is the Powers using his power was able to get his daughter a job on Deadwood playing the head prostitute working under him. It's a sweet, sweet story.
Yeah. And then, of course, you ended up, like, because I'm guessing you had known this child from...
Well, it was... See, Powers and I, we went to school together at SMU. He was a graduate student. I was a lowly undergrad. But I knew he and his wife, Pam, and they had this lovely baby, Paris. And usually at some point in the evening when Powers had had enough Budweiser, he would crawl up on the pool table and go to sleep. And Paris and Pam and I would stay up and talk. And we talked about stained glass and horses and Powers sleeping on the pool table. But at one point, I diapered Paris. I mean, she was an infant, a little baby. And now here, we wind the clock forward a couple decades later, we're doing Deadwood, and David Milch asks me if I would have simulated sex in a bathtub with Paris. So in a universe, I mean, you have a couple ways of looking at the universe. You could look at the universe as a universe of cause and effect or a universe of probability. But what would be the probability that you would end up having simulated sex with a girl that previously in your life you had diapered? It wasn't as uncomfortable for me as Paris, and I was trying to calm her down before the simulated sex scene and said, Paris, just relax. You know, we've known each other for years, nothing. And she said, well, I'm just going to think of you as one of my dad's old drunken buddies, which certainly made me feel good to be put in that company.
Yeah, of course. And I'm guessing Powers runs for the hills during this scene.
Well, he wasn't on stage. He wasn't even present because I had Powers' trailer. Mm-hmm. When we did Deadwood. Now, here's probably a story that Earl didn't mention of the uncomfortability of Deadwood. There was a real hierarchy of trailers and of parking spaces. So people like Powers Booth actually got a trailer that they could change clothes in. I was so low on the totem pole. I had a trailer that had a toilet in it, but I had a choice. I could either have a place to sit or have a floor. Now, if I wanted to walk to the bathroom, I had to lift up this place to sit, step on the floor, and walk to the toilet. So I was really hard pressed. It was like in Alcatraz, where they have the hole where they keep people for punishment. That was my trailer. But on the day I had simulated sex with Powers' daughter, I got to stay in his trailer. So I used all of it.
Yeah.
I used every bit of it. So.
Now, did you say anything? Were there any jokes exchanged, or were you staying in, like, during the scene?
He wasn't there.
No, but for you and her, what was the way to keep it?
Oh, no. When we did the scene, it was tense enough as it was. Because there's always a certain amount of tension when you're doing a sex scene, especially for the lady involved. Mm-hmm. Because she knows that within 20 minutes of finishing that scene, it's going to be on the internet.
Right.
So she wants to look good. And Californication is the same thing.
Yeah.
Whenever I do the sex scenes on Californication, I don't care.
Yeah.
Because all my nakedness does in Californication is give people bad dreams. But the girls that I'm with, either Pam or, a couple last season, they were upset. They were nervous going into the scene that it would hurt their careers.
Yeah.
Sex scenes with me always seem to hurt people's careers.
Well, even if somebody did come across you, they're usually fast-forwarding a little bit to the other
Most
part.
people fast-forward through the material to get to the sex scene. When I am in a project with a sex scene, they fast-forward through the sex scene just to get to the talking scenes.
If we're talking about Deadwood for a second, I wanted to say, because one of the things I talked to Earl about was the language in the show.
Yeah.
And so he was saying the first line that he didn't really improvise, but he had changed a little bit was, I think the line was like, where is Swearingen? He's like, oh, he's at it's something about he's at the gym. That's where most people end up, or something like that. He added like the last line. And then I guess David came up to him. He's like, "Oh, you're writing the show now." Like it was like a confrontational thing, but he's like, "Oh, but I like that. It's good. Do you write?" And that was kind of like he had to go through it. So was there any experience just with the language? Because I would think it would be a little difficult to manage the material. What was your experience with all that?
I did not swear. I was one of the few people on Deadwood that didn't swear. In fact, I think I had one swear word, but it was only in response to someone else.
Oh, okay.
And can I use swear words on
this?
Yeah. Of course. You say, of course.
I'm a comedian.
Come on, you're a comedian.
Keep it natural.
It's like they have put me in a cage on Deadwood, and they're going to kill me. I am a government man, Commissioner Hugo Jari. So they have me in a cage in the saloon, and they're going to tear me to pieces. And they said, "We're going to fuck you." And I yell back at them, "You can't fuck me, sir. I am the future. the future fucks you. And I thought it was a fabulous line. But it's the only bad language I had. I think for me, the most quintessential Deadwood scene is the cocksucker scene. Mm-hmm. You know the cocksucker scene? It's, in case your listeners haven't heard of it. Did you talk about it with Earl?
I don't think so, no. We talked about that fight with Earl, the street fight.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
If you don't know Deadwood, if you don't know that show, there was a scene in which a Chinese worker is trying to tell his boss he recognizes a man getting off a train as one of the tongs, as a bad person coming to town,
right.
And he is coming back to warn his boss that a killer has come into town, but the only English word he knows is cocksucker. So he comes back and is yelling, cocksucker, 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 cocksucker. Yeah. And he goes through every range of emotion you can. It is both hilarious and horrible. It is heartbreaking, and it is the essence of Deadwood.
Cocksucker. Oh, for Christ's sake. Cocksucker. It's wasted on me, Woo. Cocksucker. Cocksucker. I don't get it, Woo. I am not as smart as Al. And there's too much on our fucking plate right now to deal with it. Cocksucker! Cocksucker! San Francisco! Jesus fucking Christ. All right, there's an invisible cocksucker next to you, and he's from San Francisco. Oh! Cocksucker! San Francisco cocksucker! I'm going to... You want me to tell Al that there's a cocksucker? He looks like you, and he's from San Francisco, and he's got your dander. I'm going up now. I'll go tell him. Tell him what? God only knows.
Okay, and the good thing about this podcast, we have production value. So we'll end up getting the sound clip of the scene right here.
Oh, cool.
So we can talk about it as if people have just watched it.
Now, I don't know, again, if Earl talked about this. This may be an apocryphal story, but it is what I heard about Deadwood, which I think sounds and feels so true to me, is that David Milch always wanted to do a show about ancient Rome, was the deal. Did you guys talk about this?
He didn't talk about it, but I had read that in one of the articles that they were already doing the Greek show. I'm assuming it was Game of Thrones or something like that.
David wanted to do this was his idea. He wanted to do a show about the ancient Rome, beginning of civilization, where the actors don't speak English.
Oh, right.
They speak in Latin, and all with subtitles. And the show would have the incredible violence of the age coming in contrast with growing forces of civilization trying to pull man up from the gutter into the sunshine. And he went to pitch this at HBO, and they say, "Baby Bubala, what we really want is a Western." And David said, "Oh, it's the same thing." And so Deadwood became born from doing this ancient Rome thing and the swearing, or the dialogue which I had, which was kind of backwards iambic pentameter, impossible to learn. And David did want it word perfect, but impossible to do. Is you cannot understand what people are saying.
Right.
The purpose of profanity, if you look up the word fuck in the Oxford OED, the OED, the Oxford English Language Dictionary, it has more definitions to it than any other word in the English language. It is a noun, it is a verb, it is an adverb, it is an interjection,
right.
It's an adjective, it's everything, and you'll see the list of all the meanings. When you say words that mean everything, you are saying nothing, which is one reason why when I do my stories, if I find myself using a lot of profanity, I try to go back and rethink it, because there's probably a more specific way to say it.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a big thing in stand-up is there's the, well, this is the last bastion of free speech. You should be able to say anything. And then there's the whole, well, how universal do you want your stuff to be? So you get to the, you're beginning, you do the Lenny Bruce thing, and then even George Carlin-esque, but then you almost come back to where there's guys like Brian Regan and Jim Gaffigan who a 6-year-old can go to their show and not, and not necessarily get everything, but not be offended, and parents wouldn't worry about it and still just be laugh out loud funny. And so there's a lot of, Seinfeld's a guy who always worked very clean. And when you do a TV show, you have to work clean and through all the standards and practices. So it used to be like, well, I'm going to say what I want. But then it's like you get to the position where you're on TV. It's like, well, just there's these certain parameters that you have to be funny in. If you're a funny person, you'll find a way to do it. And that's all, if I went to Europe, I'd have to, I couldn't talk about Ralph's or, any local references, but I'd find a way to kind of, make my material work for the audience,
right.
Which is what you really want to do. You want people to understand and enjoy your material instead of just being a selfish blowhard,
Right. And you also have to, words are the vehicles we have to express our ideas. And you got to have ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you could put whatever words you want carrying logs or whatever you're carrying on those vehicles, but you're going nowhere because you got no ideas.
Right.
You got to have ideas first.
Yeah. And now, especially now, I think there was such a restriction on language that everyone's just, especially with
when
podcasting.
Was that? When was there a restriction on language?
During the 80s when Johnny Carson was doing The Tonight Show. If you did 5 minutes on there and hit a home run, it changed your career.
Yes.
And so that's what every comedian in LA had, a clean 5-minute set.
Yes,
and that's
yes.
all you had is clean 5-minute sets. And then there were all these other people that are like, well, that's not really what I do. I tell stories and I swear a little bit, and some of it's about sex. So then those people were kind of on the outside, and that's kind of how the alternative scene started with the storytelling. And hey, what if I want to do more than 4.5 minutes and not do an impression of my mother, or so, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now it's kind of come back to where you can kind of it used to be joke, where now you can see Letterman and see a guy just say one story, and as long as it's really funny, you can do that. But back before, everything was like set up, punch. So the structure is changing a little bit, and I'm a big fan. I like concise things, and I like I come out of TV news was my first occupation, so I just had to write in those restrictions of, hey, this introduction has to be 10 seconds. So come up with something good that introduces the point, not necessarily having to be funny, but it still prepared me for because basically a joke is. We all have friends that they tell this story, and it's like they tell the introduction for 3 minutes of setting it up, and I'm so used to being around comics, like, come on, let's just go. You know how to just introduce it in a couple sentences and tell me what happened, instead of this big rambling introduction. But that's what stand-up is. You just trial and error until you figure out. And with the storytelling, which line is working, what isn't. Hey, what isn't clear? Why aren't people getting this point? Because this should be funny. And so it's all trial and error like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm wondering, so with the storytelling, the only other person I've seen do what you do on a book scale level is David Sedaris, because that's what he basically develops his stories, doing these, speaking engagements. What has been your process just for doing these speaking engagements?
Well, I start off with the idea, you bring up something very interesting, is that you always have limitations. Like with the news, you have X number of seconds you have to do this. With me, the kind of limitations I gave myself is I want my stories to be true. And, we could talk about what the hell that means.
Yeah.
Because true is what is true. And true for me may not be true for you.
Yeah.
But in telling stories that are true, I found a lot of things happen. One is the audience immediately recognizes that I'm not trying to pull the wool over their eyes, and they're open to whatever I'm about to say. Also, if you're telling a true story, the story can continue on. It can continue to grow.
Yeah, because you start remembering things. If it really happened, then there's other details that pop
or
up.
Another example, I remember there was one story I used to tell about when I found out I was going to be a father. My wife was working in Alaska. I was working in Memphis on Great Balls of Fire. I get a phone call at 8 in the morning. Immediately, my male brain goes off and says, 8 in the morning? She's in Alaska, and you start figuring back the time zones, and you think, like, this got to be a bad phone call, man, because she waited to 8 to call me, which means it's got to be, like 3 in the morning if you're in Anchorage, Alaska. So she said, hello, Stephen, I'm pregnant. And I was like, oh, no. Oh, my gosh. Suddenly, life has totally changed with me. Now, people in the audience understand this situation.
And I think I've seen this. You tell this story too. So
yes,
which is great.
Yes, you have, and that I realized how excited I was that I was going to be a father, and I needed to tell someone I was going to be a father. Well, the first person that came to the hotel room was the cleaning lady, and she knocked on the door, and she says, I come back later. I said, no, please, come right on in, come right. It's a big day for me. My girlfriend just called me. Looks like she's pregnant. I'm going to be a father. And the maid says, well, I pray for you, honey. It wasn't the hit I needed. And then I went to the bartender who knew me for the last few weeks, and he says, with a look kind of like there, but for the grace of God, go I. He says, well, drinks on the house, pal.
Yeah.
And eventually, I wander into the breakfast area, and there was a guy I knew. It was the stunt man on the movie, Dick, and I still didn't get that hit of someone congratulating me or sharing this moment with me. So Dick says, hey, pal, what's shaking? And I said, well, a lot is shaking today, Dick. I just talked to my girlfriend, Ann, on the phone. Looks like going to have a baby. Looks like going to have a baby. And Dick was mopping up his eggs with a piece of toast, and he stopped and he stared at me and he said, well, you are in it now, pal. Let me tell you, once you have a baby, life will never be the same ever again. And my heart kind of stopped a little bit. And that was the story. That was pretty much the story for the next 14 years.
Right.
But because it was a true story, 14 years later, I'm sitting in a restaurant here in Los Angeles. Now I'm married to Ann. Now we have 2 kids. We're out eating sushi, and Ann gets this weird look as she looks above me, and these hands come down on my shoulder. And I turn around. It's Dick. It's Dick after 14 years. Now I'm seeing Dick again. And he starts punching me in the stomach and things like that, and I hate it when guys do that, and they punch you in the stomach. He says, hey, you want to play golf sometime? I said, sure, Dick, sure, play golf. I look up at him, and he's got these tears coming down his face. And I said, Dick, are you all right? He said, I just lost my firstborn, my baby, my girl. She was 24 years old. She had an asthma attack. She couldn't get to the hospital in time. I had to find someone to tell. I'm walking down the street, and I look in the window here, the restaurant, and I saw you, and I knew you would understand. So let me tell you something, pal. When you lose a child, your life will never be the same again, ever. Never again. And these 2 moments I had with Dick, the story completely changed, but it only changed because the first story was true. So when I tell a story, I begin with a core of something I feel I have to tell, like the story of Dick. I have to tell that story. It's an important story for me. Sometimes I don't know why they're important. But then, kind of like in science fiction movies, like when a spaceship is going through the asteroid belt and like all the magnetized asteroids start clinging to the spaceship, as I'm going through there, other bits of stories and other pieces of ideas glom onto my stories and start creating this gigantic snowball of a story that I'm going like, well, what is this story really about? And sometimes I don't even know what the story is about until it evolves into what it is.
Yeah, and that's what life is. I think that a lot of those stories don't come complete, so you're kind of like, well, what does this mean, or what do I learn from this? Not acting like it's, life is a sitcom, but it's like that experience has to pay off something down the road, or something's going to come around from that.
Yeah,
so.
I was working on a movie in Laguna Beach, and the motel they put me up at didn't have a restaurant, and I didn't have a car. So the only place I could get food was a couple blocks away, which was a kind of a 7-Eleven kind of thing run by, at least the guy who was working there that day was Oleg. I'm saying his name is Oleg because that's what it said on his tag.
Yeah.
And this place was, imagine a 7-Eleven, but it wasn't a 7-Eleven, but it was like one. And what they had is they had a lot of coffee. They had lots of beer. They had cold drinks and chips, different kinds of chips, Fritos, pretzels, whatever. In other words, it wasn't really your traditional breakfast place. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking, what the hell am I going to eat here? So I get a bag of Fritos. I get a bag of potato chips. I get a bag of little pretzels. And I come up to Oleg, and he looks at me and goes, "You have lots of chips." I said, "Oleg, that's all you sell. All you sell is chips. Believe me, if you had something other than chips, I would buy it. But all you have is chips." And I realized, I'm thinking like, why do I write that down? You know, I got my little notebook and I wrote down Oleg and the chips.
Right.
Because that's the way everybody views life. And I don't mean we're the guy buying chips. We're Oleg. Mm-hmm. We are behind the counter, and we see life as beer, coffee, chips. We have this limited vision of the life we lead, and we try to put everything into whatever that template is.
Right.
And we try to understand that as our life. And the only way, and I'm just thinking of this now, I think the only way we break out of being Oleg is through metaphor.
Yeah.
Is that we find, okay, Oleg could understand that if I were in a proper breakfast store, instead of buying Fritos, I would have eggs and bacon. You know, I would have a real breakfast.
Right.
He could understand that through metaphor and an association. And I think that's what I try to do with my stories, is try to create a bigger framework than the story itself. It's my philosophy about showbiz stories. Like, whenever I did, like, birthday party, Stephen Tobolowsky's birthday party, when I did The Dangerous Animals Club, my book, people always say, "Hey, we love the show business stories. Can we have show business stories?" Mm-hmm. And I get kind of cold sweat because I think show business stories are kind of a shallow grave. Like, everybody thinks they're going to be really funny, and sometimes they are, like me getting advice on how to be a good father from Mel Gibson. I mean, there's always something interesting happening.
Well, it's just like in stand-up, you can do, in L.A., you can do jokes about an audition, and people will yuck it up. It's almost like doing subway jokes in New York City, but nobody else is going to, know anything about what you're talking about.
So true.
Yeah.
That is there's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Metaphor. It's perfect. Yeah. Who the hell knows audition stories, audition jokes? Actors like it. Nobody else knows what the hell you're talking about. And so I think unless you could frame a show business story in a larger context, it ceases, it becomes more universal if you're able to do that.
Yeah, and also the more that I live here, the less kind of real life stories that you have that do connect to those other people. So that's why I grew up in upstate New York in a town of 5,000 people.
Where'd you grow up?
Owego, New York. It's just right near Cornell University up there in Binghamton area. Yeah.
I did summer stock, kind of Forestburg.
Oh, okay.
In the Catskills over by...
Oh, wait. But I did hear an interview with you that you said you went to Scranton, which is like an hour. Didn't you go to Scranton, Wilkes-Barre for...
Yeah, my granny lived in Troop, Pennsylvania, which is right down the street from Wilkes-Barre.
Right.
And the rest of my family lived in Scranton.
Okay. Yeah, that's like an hour south of Binghamton. So that's the same type of area. Everybody works at, in my town, they had the IBM plant. So you either worked there or you were a teacher or you were a nurse. And my parents were a teacher and a nurse. My dad was my gym teacher, basketball coach, and driver ed teacher. So it's like you knew everybody in the whole town and all these characters, and I didn't appreciate it until after I grew up.
That is so true about a small town. In Troop, Wilkes-Barre, coal mining is what it is. Everybody was a coal miner unless you ran a shop. Paul Freeman ran the ice cream store. and he got one of the first nose jobs ever in American history. He got it, I think, in like 1947, and it went terribly wrong. And so his nose turned a vibrant kind of purple.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was a little kid going there, I would walk in and go, Mr. Freeman, what happened to your nose? And my Aunt Esther would like whack me. And she explained to me, that the circulation wasn't right after the nose. I still had no idea what a nose job was.
Yeah.
But he always looked like he had a Japanese eggplant on his face. And, my Aunt Esther taught me, like, sometimes things go wrong in life, Stephen. You don't point out things of people, and you don't do things like that. And I think I was lucky in a way in that so many people in my family, the main instruction I got in life was not intellectual instruction or philosophical instruction, but was kindness. There were a lot of people in my family that had that thing you were talking about a small town sort of thing. You treat people with decency because, man, that creates your karma. It comes back on you. Whatever you do, it comes back just faster than you could possibly imagine.
The one funny thing that reminded me when you said the thing about the chips was the first time I moved to New York City, I was doing a spot at Dangerfields, and this is what I used to do. I used to drive from upstate New York to New York City twice a week. I would do that. I'd drive 3.5 hours down, 3.5 back during the middle of the night, and I would substitute teach during the day. And so I was always rushing to get down there. So I rushed to get down there, and there was a place right next door to Dangerfields. It was like, in New York City they have these, these Asian, like, it'll be like a 7-Eleven type place, but the guy will be able to make food in there. He'll make sandwiches or soup, or they'll pull anything out of the bottom drawer, you know what I mean? So I said, hey, I got to get a sandwich for the way back, but I want to make sure you're still going to be open after my show's done. So what time do you close? And he just looks at me. He goes, never. And so that was kind of that thing. It was like welcome to New York kind of moment,
Yeah. Never. God, I think so many of the stories from New York, first of all, what you say about anonymity, so true. So true is everybody feels they're anonymous. But so many of the stories of New York that really leave their mark and stay there are the personal kind of moments like that. And it's not small town moments, but it is like that really one-on-one personal thing that happens in New York that seems to happen nowhere else.
Right.
It just kills you, on the street.
Well, I mean, you have all these great, like, and I don't know what it is. Like, do you feel like you are a person that looks for these connections, or these kind of odd occurrences happen to you that seem to be, like, circumstantial, I guess? I mean, I have one good story of our basketball team went to Ireland the summer before my senior year. We got to play basketball. We played against all these cities, every city in like southeastern Ireland, I guess. And so we were on a bus for about 2 weeks, and we had this bus driver that drove us everywhere. And we would stay with the families, and we'd play games, and it was a fantastic experience. But the bus would go through all these old cities in Ireland and barely have 6 inches on each side. You'd see people open the door and then duck back. It was like one of those cartoons, And so this guy, the guy's name was Larry, was the bus driver. We had this guy. He was our full-time bus driver, would stay in our hotels, everything. Just chain smoking, kind of, gruff guy. And so one time in the middle of the night after we were eating, the bus just pulls over like in this pasture, and he runs out. And it turned out he was choking on a chicken bone from like a McDonald's chicken sandwich. And so it was kind of like, oh, okay, everything's okay, but it was still like we got a bus parked in this pasture in the middle of nowhere. And so I always remember that. So I go to Ireland 12 years later, going from Galway to Dublin with my girlfriend, and we stop like about halfway, and they say, hey, there's something wrong with the tracks. We have to unload everybody. So there's like 30 buses out there, so you just get on one of the buses, and they'll take you the rest of the way. So I get on the bus, and I sit down, and I see the bus driver. And I said, holy shit, I know that guy. And my girlfriend's like, yeah, right, because this stuff kind of happens to me. And I said, no, he was the guy who drove us in when our basketball team came here 12 years ago. And so I was like, I have to ask him. So I get off the bus, and the guy's still smoking. And I come up to him, I was like, I asked him this generic, hey, remember you drove a bunch of tourists around for like a week, which I'm sure he does every week. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, oh, remember you choked on that chicken bone? And his eyes just brighten up. He goes, oh, yeah, goddamn McDonald's. I remember that. So I got a picture with him 12 years later and sent it to all the guys that I went on the trip with. But, there's no way they would have believed that unless I actually got the picture, And
I hear the story, and I know it's true. Mm-hmm. There's a thing in my head that rings like that has to be true.
Yeah.
I think there is a synchronicity that when that happens in our life, we have a sort of sense that it was planned, that there is a sense of purpose.
Or that at least I was looking for. I always feel like I have to open myself up to whenever someone asks you to go to something that you would never normally do. Comedian-wise, you always think, hey, the experience at least maybe some material or something, because that's what we were actually. I was watching the Seinfeld with my girlfriend last night with you on there, and it's you as the holistic healer.
Yes.
And then Seinfeld was like, well, at least I got to go for the material. But
I think, for example, my wife and I were thrown out of restaurants twice because Ronald Reagan was going to dine there. Once in Washington, D.C., and then once in Helsinki, Finland, 2 years apart.
Wow.
And so I'm thinking, at this point, it almost felt like bullying. Mm-hmm. But we went to Old Ebbitt's Grill in Washington, D.C., and the Secret Service come in. You're going to have to leave, sir. Ronald Reagan is coming in to dine. And we leave. And then we're in Helsinki, Finland. We're going to eat. You have to leave, sir. Ronald Reagan. And I see the synchronicity of that, and I go it has to be a plan.
Yeah.
Things like that don't happen, but you're so right about keeping your eyes open. Now, what I've always done my whole life is I've taken notes. Mm-hmm. I've taken notes without prejudice. If something I thought was remarkable, not big or odd or funny or sad, but just worthy of remark, I wrote it down and then looked at it later with a sort of perspective and went oh, wait a minute. These point A meets with point A over here. Mm-hmm. It becomes like a game of concentration where you try to find the two of clubs and the two of hearts, and suddenly you have a pair. So much of life, for me, well, I guess you always remember your death-defying moments. Mm-hmm. I think all of us have had a few of those where we meet the Grim Reaper, or kind of. We always remember the moments where we were in love. Mm-hmm. Those moments we remember. We remember the moments of synchronicity. And we remember moments where we learned things and our lives changed. I think, I went through this one period of time where I couldn't talk. For 2 months, I was having vocal surgery, and I had to not talk for a month, then have surgery, not talk for a second month. 2 months of not talking completely changes your life.
Yeah.
I think there are people in L.A. that have workshops that you pay somebody $1,000 for you not to talk for a week to see how to. Let me tell you, when you don't talk for 2 months, you become aware, besides how little you have to say, really, at any particular point in time.
Yeah.
Why did anyone listen to you in the first place? But you begin to listen so much more to the world, and you go oh my gosh, all this was going on, and I never paid attention to it. Mm-hmm. Never paid attention to it at all. And that is what I've tried to, I guess, certainly with my storytelling, in the last 5 years when I've been devoted to it, is to really listen more than I did before, to try to see what makes sense.
Well, for me, it comes from, especially comedians, I've heard Chris Rock say this, that the worst thing about being famous is that he doesn't get to be a fly on the wall anymore. Because when you travel to all these towns, you're by yourself. You're not with a band. Nobody knows who you are. So if you're eating in a diner, somebody can treat you like crap. You can overhear somebody. They're not self-conscious of anybody listening. So and nobody knows that you're anything or will be able to talk about it later. So you get these great genuine moments of, especially if you're, you go to a car garage or something and somebody just, dismisses you or insults you or something like that, or you see something in a store, like I get to say that. And so that's the great thing about being like that fly on the wall, like you're saying, the listening thing. I've never I had laryngitis once and I couldn't talk for 2 weeks. And that messes with your head because, the voice is our instrument, it's our livelihood. So for me, I just didn't know, you want answers right away. And sometimes they don't say, I don't know, because that was a complication from your broken neck, right?
It was before the broken neck.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it was kind of getting out of that where I had to be quiet for such a long period of time as when my wife Ann said, why don't we go to Iceland and ride horses? Because that was silent.
Yeah.
So it, out of the frying pan into the fire.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's anything that pulls you away from actively being in society, whether it's like if you're sick for a couple weeks, a lot of people got this flu or whatever, and it's like when you're not, that can really knock you out and make you depressed if you can't even participate. And, there's some people who like running every day, and if you get in a position where that can happen, some people just don't even know how to react to it. It really test your sanity after a while. I'm sure 2 months, were you calm about it, or were you still worried like, hey, I might never get my voice back?
Terrified.
Yeah.
And it was a very scary moment. And when the time was up and I was able to talk again, I was terrified.
Yeah.
Terrified to phonate.
Right.
How many times have you been terrified to phonate in your life?
Right.
And I was just so scared of making sound come up and making my vocal cords vibrate.
Uh-huh.
I just read a very interesting science article that you kind of triggered something about.
Yeah.
And that is this group of scientists in Israel detected that we do perceive time differently when, everybody says, well, when you're in the dentist chair, when you're making love, this goes fast, this goes slow.
Right.
But they found an area of the brain that kind of monitors our internal clock. And we do tend to perceive things taking different amounts of time. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, sitting here talking to you now, if the moments we remember are the moments in which time is distorted. The elevated moments where time seems to go faster, if that catches our attention, and as you say, when we're dissed, or when we're at a low point, or where things are really bad, where time seems to slow down, if that activates our memory too. Mm-hmm. And these two areas, maybe I'm very sensitive to the areas of time going faster and slower for me.
Right.
I only mention this. I had a weird memory just this week. I don't know if you heard the story about my heart surgery.
No.
Okay. This was like an incredibly weird experience that completely changed me, completely changed my life. When I was, the last words you hear are from a stranger, always, and usually the anesthesiologist. And he says, when you wake up, you're going to have tubes down your throat. Whatever you do, don't try to talk. Try to just relax. A machine is going to be breathing for you. Don't panic. Then you're gone. Mm-hmm. Your loved one who's waiting for you for 6 hours, they're going through hell waiting for you. But you do not perceive this next period of time. Mm-hmm. It's just black. And then I heard voices in the recovery room. And it was my friend Richard. Julie Haggerty was there. Mm-hmm. My wife Ann. I heard the voices. And I opened an eye, and Richard said, I think I saw his eyelid move. And I look up at the clock, and it says 2:00. So immediately my brain is working, how long have I been under? Because I knew I got there at 5 a.m, so I'm going like, okay, I see, okay, I'm getting the idea. 2:00. And then I realized, I remember the anesthesiologist's word, don't talk, Don't do anything. Don't. And then suddenly I felt like I was dying. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't do anything. I was going to choke. And I began to get that panic thing. And I look up at the clock, it says 2 o'clock. Then I fall asleep. I have a dream. I have a dream where I'm at a villa, and there's a villa with stables, and there's a beautiful fountain at this villa, and I'm calling through the villa asking if there's anybody else there, and I hear the voice echo, and then I wake up and I open my eyes. The clock on the wall says 2 o'clock. I hear more talking in the room. The clock remains 2, and I'm thinking, time has stopped.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. A doctor comes in and says, just relax. We'll be able to get those tubes out in 10, 15 minutes, 20 at the max. Just relax. And in my head, I'm thinking, I could do 20 minutes. I could do Yom Kippur. I could do 20 minutes with the tubes down my throat. And I look up at the clock after the doctor leaves, 2 o'clock. Oh, my God. How am I going to do 20 minutes, 15 minutes if time has stopped? So time slowly began to start up again later. But I had this experience where time stopped. And it made me realize, that you see in the hospital that the future is granted to nobody. I saw people younger and stronger than me, dead, gone dead. They didn't make it through the surgery. You go in groups, like little classes, and they do it in groups, and then you come out the other side and you see, several of our class didn't make it.
Yeah.
So the future isn't granted to anybody. And the past is only what you could remember, which means what? All you have is the present? Yeah. I saw that I didn't even have the present.
Right.
That all you really have is the next moment. The next moment is all you can have. And you could do anything you want in that next moment. You could get loaded. You could tell a joke. You can go buy chips from Oleg. Or you could tell someone you love them or try to undo a regret you have.
Right.
And the thing I have learned in my life that only those last two things are going to matter is telling someone you love them and a regret. What I remembered this week was I had a dream years ago, 20 years ago, after someone very, very close to me passed away. And she came back to me in a dream. And she started describing heaven to me. Now, for some reason, I hadn't really remembered it until this week. But I had written it down. I wrote it down on one of my stupid little journals. And I found it. And I went like, oh, my God. She came back in a dream. And she said, Stephen, as you get closer to death, time gets longer and longer and longer. And I said, so is it that when you step off the edge, that moment you go to heaven, is just that last moment of your life seems like infinity?
Yeah.
And I woke up. I didn't get the answer.
Yeah.
But heaven and hell could be the way we perceive that last moment. And I remember when one of my friends was passing away, he said he was scared, and I was saying, but we make our own heaven here. Don't be scared, because we're here and we love you. And I'm wondering if that's what makes our memories, is our perception of time.
Well, I
don't know.
And we're not stoned, by the way.
No, we're not.
We're drinking water. So
well, I'm drinking PG Tips, actually.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, speaking of the time standing still thing, you've probably gotten this a lot, but I just wanted to talk about Groundhog Day for a minute, just because it did become one of my favorite movies, and I'm a big fan of movies in general, and I love all the classics, and I've watched every Academy Award winning movie from the beginning, but I love all genres. But comedy-wise, we always talk about, well, what is the perfect comedy?
Yeah.
And then I remember Bill Murray saying It Happened One Night is the only great comedy. Like, this was years ago. And he's like, there's only a couple stories. And so whenever someone says comedy, like I think of something that has everything in it, or straight comedy, I'll say like a Slapshot, which you have George Roy Hill directing, Paul Newman as the actor, and then it's a great comedy script with a bunch of great characters and a story. On ice. Yeah, on ice, basically. But when you see Groundhog Day, it's Bill Murray, a great cast with yourself, and then the script, which Harold Ramis, and this script, which I guess did get altered through the process, because the first time you watch the movie, you're watching it for the laughs, like you just watch it as a comedy, but then you see it, and then as you watch it when you're older, it's like, wow, this is almost like a religious commentary on how to live your life, or a spiritual thing. It's so much deeper, and that's why really, when everyone asks me what's the greatest comedy, I'll say Groundhog Day, because I feel like Rushmore is another one of those it's not necessarily a comedy, but it's kind of a lot of these things rolled up into one with the comedy. But I feel like Groundhog Day is just this perfect kind of, funny story, great cast, and just it makes you think afterwards. It's like those Paul Thomas Anderson movies. I'll talk to guys and they're like, well, nothing happens. What happens at watch The Master, and it's just like, well, you think about that stuff, and that's one of the big things that art is supposed to do for you, is to challenge you a little bit and make you think. And so I wonder what your thoughts on the movie is after all these years, because obviously it's one of your most memorable roles, at least for fans of yours. What's your feeling on that?
Yeah, I think I would think Groundhog Day is one of a handful of great, perfect comedies.
Yeah.
There is an idea from Sigmund Freud, which is I thought, one of the greatest definitions of comedy of all time. He was doing some lectures in Munich, and I think it was in 1910 or something. And Sigmund Freud said comedy is making the meaningful meaningless, or making the meaningless meaningful. Mm-hmm. That's the essence of comedy.
Yeah.
And you think about it and you go, okay, when somebody slips on a banana peel and falls, that is making the meaningful, which is walking meaningless, in that they have violated the law of gravity and they fall on their ass.
Right.
The greatness of comedy depends on what meaning you're going to make meaningless, or what meaningless you're going to make meaningful. So you can have comedies where you do dopey stuff all the time, where you make meaningful stuff meaningless. That's why there's so many presidents and professors and doctors and lawyers in comedy shows, because it's easy to make somebody in a suit look ridiculous.
Yeah.
Have them slip and fall, or have them, get covered with pies if they're the Three Stooges.
Right.
The bigger the ideas you involve, the bigger the comedy becomes. Love is a huge idea. Why It Happened One Night is a fabulous comedy. When Harry Met Sally, fabulous comedy. Groundhog Day takes it even a step further, in that it involves ordinary comedy, like Bill stepping in the wet water. Watch out for that first step. It's a doozy.
Yeah.
We laugh at it at that level. But then on a bigger level, he's caught in time, which we all feel at times, where we continue to do the same mistakes over and over again. So the fact that our life is meaningful is made meaningless by the fact that we repeat the same mistakes over and over again.
Right.
And then you make that even bigger, like they do in Groundhog Day, as Bill makes this whole change of character. Nobody gives Actors Academy Awards for movies like Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, Bill Murray's performance in that movie is one of the greatest comedic performances ever, because he is both the antagonist and protagonist in the movie. He provides meaning for every scene, because comedy doesn't exist without meaning, and he's able to flip it and make it meaningless when he wants. It is effortless on his part, which is brilliant. And I think Danny Rubin's script is brilliant.
Yeah.
And Harold Ramis, great comedic director. Just one of the best. And I asked him, I said, what do you think the essence of great comedy directing is. He says the only thing you need to know as a comedy director is that all comedy lives in the two-shot. He says everybody makes a mistake when they do comedies by having all the damn close-ups.
Right.
That it's because you have to have the schlemiel and the schlemazel. You have to have the guy that falls, but you have to have the guy that responds to it.
Right.
And then as an audience, we laugh. It isn't just Bill Murray punching me in a close-up of me getting punched and falling out of frame. We have both of us in frame. You see Bill punching me or Bill hugging me.
Yeah, that's a genius. I mean, when you go for that reaction of, like, even in real life, when I was a younger kid, you get these people that would talk to you and bother you and stuff like that. And when I watched that, it's like, yeah, what if you just hugged the guy really tightly? He would, you know.
That's the one scene, I think, that was improvised.
Oh, yeah, so that was, I was going to ask you about that, because I know just from a lot of stories about Bill that he likes to keep the other actors kind of like guessing a little bit, and so all the moments are pretty genuine.
I don't know if that's his motivation. I wouldn't dare put a motivation on Bill, but I would say that working with him as an actor, every take was fresh. Every take was like he started from zero. He bounced off whatever you did, no matter how few or how many takes you did. It was really, really spectacular acting. I mean, he was a great, great person to work with.
And was there ever any danger? I remember hearing a story about when he was doing the Caddyshack, the Dalai Lama speech. That kid was telling the story about how, you know, he's just supposed to talk to him in the shed, and Bill grabs this pitchfork, and it's literally like, and if you watch the scene, the kid is literally scared the whole time he's telling him. And it's just because it was so off guard for him that he tried to like make the moment genuine about that.
I think there is something about Bill that's out of control.
Yeah.
And I think that at times it could be frustrating or irritating or gnawing or whatever. But there's one story Harold Ramis told me that, again, I wasn't witness to it. I just heard the story, but I'll pass it on to you as if it were true. But that it was 45 days into shooting, and Bill was doing the big final scene with Andy, where time starts again. And if you remember that shot, it's the same beautiful shot of that clock radio turning from 5:59 to 6.
Right.
The Sonny and Cher comes down.
And that actually was what I was just thinking about when you were telling the story about the time not moving. I was like, the last time I've seen that is in that shot. I was wondering if Groundhog Day maybe got in your subconscious a little bit.
I don't know, man. I don't know. It's like I didn't even think about Groundhog Day when I was in the hospital. I was too busy looking at that digital clock on the wall, and I had tubes down my throat, and the idea of movies was not in my head.
Right.
But it's a 6-page dialogue scene, and the camera pulls back. You remember we see Bill opening his eyes, horrified again. It's happened, and then Andy's hand crosses into frame. And when I saw it with the full audience, the audience gasped because they went, "Wow, it's different.
Yeah.
Today is different." And Bill didn't want to shoot the scene.
Oh yeah.
Now they're 45 days into shooting. Everybody's getting a little on edge. Everybody's a little testy. And he says, "I'm not shooting this scene until I know how I'm dressed." And people are going, "What?" And he says, "I need to know how I'm dressed. Am I wearing the clothes I wore the night before? Am I not wearing clothes? Am I wearing some of the clothes we wore the night before? Am I wearing PJs? In other words, did we do it?" And Harold Ramis said, "That's a great question. Well, let me open it up to you, Bill. Do you think you did it?" He says, No. You're not pulling that on me. I'm asking you. And Harold Ramis opened it up to the entire cast and crew. He says, "Let's put it to a vote. What is Bill wearing? Did they do it or did they not do it?" And everybody took a vote. And when it came down to it, it was a tie. And it came down to an assistant set decorator. It was her first big movie she had worked on. And she was the deciding vote. And Harold Ramis said, "What is it?" And the girl said, They're in exactly the clothes they wore the night before. If you do it any other way, you will ruin the film. And so Harold Ramis laughed and said, well, there you go, Bill. You're wearing exactly the clothes you wore the night before. If you do it any other way, it ruins the film. Mm-hmm. And that's the way they shot it. And, as I think about it, she was absolutely right. It would have ruined the film if there was an idea that Bill and Andy had had sex.
Yeah.
Because by that point, the idea of love and relationship in the film was so much bigger than just...
and then it opens up to, did having sex knock him out of the... out of that world, you know what I mean? They always have when people drink out of the same cup, they change, in those movies, they're at the same wishing well at the same time. Maybe the intercourse is the thing that knocked him out of the...
Yeah, well...
You can't change it into that.
It's you and your driver in Ireland. It's synchronicity. Synchronicity, suddenly we enter the alternate universe when you hit the synchronicity, that moment that kind of says, oh, my life has some sort of plan, and somehow it has to do with a McDonald McChicken sandwich. I don't know.
Well, I had a couple of things I want to ask you, and thanks so much for being patient with me, because I really enjoy talking to you. And I know I won't put you on the spot, but I know that you have, we were talking to Earl the other day about just your, especially as an actor, just dealing with the ups and downs and staying positive and not getting your hopes up too much, but then not being able to enjoy anything either. You got to almost stay even keel and kind of look towards the thing. The one, I'll give you a second to think about, the one that I have is my first TV appearance. I did the Craig Ferguson show. So all the, 7 or 8 years of stand-up leading up to this 5-minute thing, and this is all you get. You take, they take you in a limousine, and everyone knows you're going to be on TV in front of a couple million people that night, and there's famous people on the show, and it's just this fantastic experience. And since I was in TV news, the actual studio didn't really throw me off, and so it was like about as good a place as I could be in to enjoy that. I wasn't, normally I would say, oh, everything leading up to this, if I screw this up or if I get a zit on my nose, or all these things go. So everything goes well. And then I'm on top of the world. I'm going to be on TV that night. It went good, and so the limousine is taking me back, and the guy stops. There's a flat tire. So, and it's about. I was living in Playa del Rey at the time, and so I was about a mile from my house. I was on the Westchester Parkway right by LAX, and so he's like, we can call. We'll call a car to pick you up. It'll be about a half hour. And I was like, well, I can just walk. So I'm walking the last mile to my house on the Westchester Parkway, and minutes before I'm at a TV studio in a limousine, all this great stuff happening, and then here I am with my backpack walking just as I did in, New York all those days, and so it was kind of one of those things where it didn't even make me upset or anything. It was just like, oh, I think this is the way it was supposed to happen, just to keep you grounded. To be on the ground, actually. It was almost too much symbolism for me.
Yeah,
Earl had a couple where it's like, oh, you're going to be in this show, and of course, inevitably something gets pulled out from underneath you, or I don't know if that's like a Catholic thing or, a Jewish thing, or that thinking of if something goes good, just be ready. Don't get your hopes up too.
Let me ask you a real question, sitting here, because you've played at hundreds of audiences. Mm-hmm. Don't you find it, or do you find it true that each audience, when you are up there and you see those faces looking at you, each performance is vitally important to you, regardless if you're in a dive place or on a big stage?
Oh, of course, yeah.
It's the perception that millions of people are going to see. It means nothing to me. On this book tour that I've been doing for Dangerous Animals Club, when I played in Seattle for 1,100 people. I did stories and signed books for 1,100 people. When I was in Denver, I showed up, there were 12 people there. 12 people there, and some of them, I don't know if English was their first language. I don't know. I think they were just trying to get out of the weather. And as I'm doing the same material I was doing in Seattle for this huge crowd, I see the eyes of two people in the audience seem engaged in the story I'm telling. And I realize it's just as important to me to reach these two people as it was doing that huge, huge show in Seattle. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, my God. What is this thing that we're in? I think, first of all, as a performer, you will have disappointments. You will have times where you lose the job. You'll have times where you're fired from the job. You'll have time where they kill you off on the job, and you go like, huh? And you never know how much it hurts your feelings. Sometimes it doesn't hurt at all.
Yeah.
It's a huge job. You lose a huge job, and you're okay in a couple of weeks. Sometimes it's a little bitty job, and it sticks with you the rest of your life. There is a line in Shakespeare, nothing can be amiss when duty and simpleness tender it. And it's in Midsummer Night's Dream, and it's when the Duke is talking to the players when they're about to perform for him, and they're all nervous. And what the Duke is saying is, you can't go wrong if the play is the thing. If duty and simpleness tender it, you can't go wrong. If your duty to your audience, if the story you're trying to tell is more important to you than your fame, then you will do well. You will recover from the bad moments, and you won't get carried away by the big moments.
Right.
I think that's important.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is like letting go of, I guess, not the past, but like even for me, when I see a great show like Deadwood, and and I wonder what you guys think about, like, wow, what if that show, like even I as a fan would have loved to just see where that show would have gone, where everyone I've talked to on the show said it was a fantastic experience, and they had no idea it was going to get canceled. Like, what was that like for you?
Yeah, when I did Thelma and Louise, shot Thelma and Louise, I'm walking down Wilshire Boulevard, and suddenly Ridley Scott came out of a place on where he goes, "Oh, Stephen, I just cut the movie together, and it's good. It's wonderful." And it was so funny that he was genuinely thrilled and surprised because, a great artist like Ridley Scott, even he wasn't sure of what he was going to have at the end. When you're doing Deadwood or something like that, you have no idea, or Groundhog Day, you have no idea of what you're making when you make it.
Right.
But I can tell you there was something similar to Groundhog Day, similar to Deadwood, and similar to Thelma and Louise. And that is, on each of those sets, the most important thing from everybody, from the crew to the actors, everybody, was the story we were telling. On the set of Groundhog Day, we were dedicated to the changes that were being made in the script. We were on the edge of our seat to see what new changes would be in the script each day, and they were all beautiful, brilliant changes.
Right.
Deadwood, to see what you were going to do the next week. All of us were dedicated, no matter the biggest star to the lowliest extra. We were proud of the story we were telling, and the same thing with Thelma and Louise. So I think when the story is bigger than your own personal stake in the story,
right,
you will be able to ride the highs and lows better than most.
And you feel like that comes, to give a sports analogy for that, they will call, when a new coach comes in, he implements his system, and the players have to buy into it. That's what they say. Like, sometimes a great coach will go to school, and he'll have a couple rotten apples that just are selfish and won't buy into the program. And, like, if you watch Hoosiers, that's one of those things, like, the new coach, he's going to make us run sprints at 5 in the morning and lift weights at 3 in the afternoon. Now, you either have a whole team that's willing to go through that because they respect the coach and they believe he knows what he's doing, or there's people who are like, I'm not doing this. This guy's crazy. I'm assuming that's how it is on that set, where it's like a confidence built into the cast and the crew that this is going to be something great.
Yeah, and there's a belief system. There is a belief system that it has to do with magic. There's a belief system that touches you somewhere. When we were on the set of Groundhog Day, where some of us are seeing dailies, we don't see all of them. And you see, okay, you read the script, somehow in the changes that happen in the script, it touches you, and you realize they have switched from making a movie that's a typical Bill Murray movie where Bill without consequences being a wild and crazy guy, to a serious, funny movie about the time of our life and how we do it. And it has to reach you on the same level magic reaches you. A good magic trick. Somewhere between heaven and earth, you are caught with a sense of wonder, and you go, oh my gosh.
Right.
The same thing with Deadwood. I didn't understand a lot of the scenes we were doing, but there was one night. Boy, how many times does an actor just cry for no reason on a set? Like, very few in my career, but 3 times. On the set of Deadwood, I remember we were finishing the last show of season 2, and I'm up with Tim and with Ian, and we're signing statehood papers for South Dakota, and Deadwood's going to become a city. And the shot was I'm coming down the stairs, and I'm wearing my huge ermine coat with the giant hat, and there's torches in the wall of Swearingen's saloon, and there are whores hanging off of the doors and dancing with each other. And outside on the street is Jim Beaver is having a wedding, and their violinists playing Over the Waves. And it was gorgeous. It was so beautiful. On my exit, I began crying. I felt I was transported in time. We go back to that time thing.
Yeah.
I felt I was transported in time, and I was really somewhere else. I mean, not really, but I went. It was beautiful, and it was magic, and I was engaged in that show on a magical level. Maybe that's it.
Yeah. That's one of the movies that we're talking about that makes you feel that way. I don't know if you feel the same way, but when I saw Midnight in Paris, that's kind of what I felt, was that was Woody Allen's, like, those were his moments that he wished he was walking onto that. If he could, like, just even for himself to be able to build that set and see what it would have looked like. I thought that was
a perfect example of engaging you on a magic level, and also the Sigmund Freud thing of making the meaningful meaningless. When Woody Allen goes in the second time change, where they're back in the area of the Moulin Rouge, and back in the area with Toulouse-Lautrec, saying, "I want a dentist. I want a place where I can have antibiotics."
Right.
He's taking the meaningful and making it meaningless, and he creates comedy by doing, and he does it just so well doing. But that's a perfect example of magic in a movie, engaging you on a magic level. Totally.
Well, that's so great that you've gotten to have so many of those moments. I mean, and I just wanted to ask one thing real quick, and then I'll ask you one last, because we do talk about sports once in a while, and there's one story that I know involves a sporting event that you've told, so I wanted to ask you about this. But were you in Kingpin? Is this a bad question to ask?
No, well, I was not in the movie Kingpin with the bowling.
Okay.
I was in the TV show Kingpin about the Mexican drug lords.
Okay, because that's what I saw it on there, and I was like, Kingpin's that's up there and one of my favorite movies, too.
Love that movie.
Same thing, Woody Harrelson, Bill Murray, this great script, and of course those guys, I feel like they do comedy almost as good as anybody when they have the right thing, something about Mary. And
take a look at Woody Harrelson's hand in terms of making the meaningful meaningless.
Yeah. Take
a look at Bill Murray's hair, the come-over of making the meaningful meaningless.
Yeah.
It's a total Freudian movie, the whole thing.
So great. Well, yeah, I'll
sports question?
end on this, so I heard you, the one story which I really love about the window and the moth. You're going to a Lakers game.
Oh, man.
So what's the rest of that story?
Yeah, it was brutal. I had made,
and I'll play a clip of this because I think I think it's online. At least
maybe
there's like a 4-minute. It looks like you're on stage at like a music kind of place. It looks like a guitar.
I did this as a reading for Word Theater, so it may be online with that.
So I'll play this, but then maybe if you want to say how it ends.
I got free tickets to go with a friend of mine, Tom Calloway. He played basketball with Pat Riley with the new Lakers. Pat Riley was the new coach, and we were talking about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, James Worthy. It was Showtime, man.
Yeah.
And we had tickets like on the 10th row, we weren't on court, but I mean, great tickets.
Yeah.
So I'm driving to the Forum, and I'm driving in my girlfriend's car, which had a permanently broken front window, in that it wasn't totally broken, in that the window was open. It was one of those hand crank windows, not electric windows, and there was about an inch of glass still up on the bottom of the window. But it was freezing. I mean, the only thing that kept you warm in that car was the rock and roll radio. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to the forum. It's like about 10 minutes before the game starts, and I finally get to the forum, and there's a long line of cars.
And not a great neighborhood, by the way.
Not a great neighborhood.
You've been there.
A long line of cars going into parking. I'm thinking like, okay, I'll park. I'll meet Tom inside. It'll all be cool. So I'm waiting there, and while I'm waiting in line to get through the gate, this moth is in the car. I have no idea. So the moth is there, flies into my face, and I try to shoo the moth out the window. Well, the moth runs into the bit of glass, the 1 inch of the window that's closed. The moth runs into that part of the window over and over again. I'm saying, get out of the car. Yeah. Then I start honking, hey, can we move this line? Can we move the line? Go, let's go, guys, let's go. I'm still waiting. The line is not moving. I'm thinking, hey, maybe somebody doesn't have the right change. Maybe they're being sent to another parking lot. Maybe this parking lot full. What the hell's going on? The moth flies into my face again, tries to fly up my nose. And I say to the moth, I will kill you if you don't get out of this car, because I have the nerve to talk tough to insects at times. Yeah. And I try to brush the moth out of the window again, and it still goes into that same stupid bottom part. I'm thinking, you are the most stupid moth in the world, you moron. The entire window is open, and you keep flying into this bottom part that is closed. The line is still not moving. I honk. Finally, I do something completely uncharacteristic for me. I'm going to raise hell. Mm-hmm. So I open the car door to get out of the car to yell, and I see, to my horror, that I was in a line of parked cars. Not only was nobody moving, but there was no gate. The gate was a part of my imagination. It wasn't even an entrance to the parking lot. Right. And then I'm looking back inside the car, and the moth is pounding against that bottom part of the window, and I realize the moth and me were exactly the same. Right. He couldn't see that the whole window was open. I couldn't see. I was behind a line of parked cars, and I realized in that moment that sometimes when an obstacle appears to be an obstacle, you get a different perspective, and you see that a wall isn't a wall. It's really a bridge. Right. And you see the world through different eyes. Yeah, that's great. And did you get to see the actual game? I got in late. Yeah. I got in at the end of the first quarter.
Everyone gets in late there anyway, right?
Yeah, but man, I saw the game. It was fantastic. I think we lost. We lost to I think we were playing the Spurs that year. Lost in the first round. Yeah. Yeah, Tim Duncan was 12, but he was still playing for the Spurs.
That was back when probably George Gervin was playing for him.
Yes!
The Iceman.
Yeah, the Iceman.
Well, thanks so much for being on the show, Stephen. I really appreciate it. I'll mention the book in the intro and everything, but it's Dangerous Animals Club. Yep. And buy that and go see. Are your tour dates on your website?
Yeah, at StephenTobolowsky.com. StephenTobolowsky. I tell everybody how to spell it, because if you spell it wrong, you go to a naked site, which is unfortunate. But StephenTobolowsky.com will have all the dates that I'm going to be playing in town. And also, if you want to order a signed copy of Dangerous Animals Club, you could do it through the website as well.
And also, see the movie as well. The Stephen Tobolowsky's birthday party is great. I'm a huge fan of documentaries. I wouldn't say it's a documentary, but it's just a great. It's almost like I felt like it was a blend of like a music documentary, even though there's no music. It was just kind of like. We did
it with no script, no rehearsal, no permits in 3 days, and it ended up all over the world. Yeah, in an HBO Comedy Festival. It went, the London Film Festival. We opened the Buenos Aires Film Festival. Opened the Bologna Film Festival. Wow. It was all over the place. It is a delightfully different movie, and so much credit goes to Robert Brinkman, the director. I have to say, he did a brilliant job of putting that movie together.
Yeah, it's really good. And before I even met you, and you're a fantastic guy and a great performer, so it's a pleasure to call you a friend now. But I've always been a fan of the movie and then the book as well. So good luck with all that. And I think the one thing I'll mention it in the intro that we did do jury duty together.
Oh, God,
the good news is that you did get out of it. But I remember even before we had started talking, that's the only time that I saw you a little jealous, was that I would just come back into the jury pool. And it was after the second time that I got released, and he's like, how do you keep getting out of this? And then I explained I was a comedian and I was going to be on tour, and then we ended up talking about we were both doing some storytelling shows.
That's so true, man. So true.
And what about that is things coming full circle. Meeting someone in jury duty and now being on a podcast. And then who knows? We might be in Groundhog Day 2 if they make a. No, I'm sure we'll be in.
We could easily be in a show together.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a stretch. I'll be in. If I up my acting resume, hopefully I got to build it up a little bit. But maybe I'll end up on Glee or Californication at some point.
I could play your alcoholic uncle tomorrow.
Well, I'll keep you in mind. Definitely, if I have my sitcom, I want definitely a person like you in the cast.
Thank you.
I'll have the whole cast of Deadwood just so you guys can get reunited.
We love it.
Well, thanks so much, Stephen. I appreciate it, and thanks for being on the show.
You got it, man.
All right. So that was the episode with Stephen Tobolowsky. Man, the guy's funny. He's done so much great work. So looking forward to that January 12th show. Funny writers reading their stories. I'll be there along with Carlos Kotkin, who's a great author and Moth Story Slam winner. He wrote the book Please God Let It Be Herpes. Also Lori Kilmartin, staff writer on The Conan Show, who wrote a parenting book called Shitty Mom, or I think it's Sh-T Mom. I don't think you can swear. I think one of the letters is blocked out. And also W. Earl Brown, another one of Steven's fellow cast members on the great TV show Deadwood, who you guys might remember from an older Alley-Oop podcast episode. So check out that show January 12th at the Promenade Playhouse in Santa Monica at 8 p.m. That's a Sunday. For ticket info, go to paulhasawebsite.com. And I'm in Amsterdam right now. I know I did the intro from Switzerland. My buddy Ari Shafir will be here shortly, and we are taking in the sights to Amsterdam this week. So we'll be doing another episode, I think, later in the week that we'll try to get out to you guys, just so you can keep tabs on us, and we can let you know what we're up to. So thanks again for listening, and go to alleyooppodcast.com for all the other info. And, yeah, we'll see you. I'll let you know how Amsterdam is.